Gina March. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I want to continue our talks about healing from trauma. I was thinking that when we're defining trauma, we do stick to these very psychological constructs and what we're used to understanding about trauma. I believe I've mentioned that before, as a catastrophic event or a one-time event. And I've come to believe that it's more a spiritual event. I want you to think about your trauma not as being broken, but as breaking free or being reborn. It's an opportunity to be stripped away of everything that you've ever known about yourself, the way that you think, the way that you feel, and the way that you operate with the world and in relationships with other people. In this breaking free, you're going to redefine who you are. See, what happens in trauma is that we get stuck. We get stuck in the moment, and we freeze in the experience of having some horrific or terrifying event. It's natural, it is human, and it's okay that we either fight, or we run, we flee, or we freeze. These are the normal responses that any human would have to trauma. But I'm inviting you to start think of it on a spiritual level. Whatever response that you have to trauma is okay, but understanding that there's something that your spirit is calling you to do to change the very fabric of who you are and become a better version of yourself. It might not seem natural to you in the midst of a traumatic event and the sorrow and the pain and the horror of it to think, oh, I'm breaking free. I'm becoming this new fabulous person that God, the universe, or whatever you believe in is calling for you to do. But what I'm saying is, as you begin the process of grief, of trauma, if you identify it in this new way, it won't hold the power that it's always held over you. See, we identify it as this bad thing happened to me and therefore I'm bad, or this horrible thing happened and now I'm scared of people, or I don't trust. Think about all the negative beliefs and the limiting beliefs that you carry around because something traumatic happened to you, and start to think to yourself, I'm a human having a human experience, and as I'm growing and maturing and changing emotionally, this experience is here to invite me to understand myself on a deeper level. Using this different construct, it allows you to feel you have some power or some authority over your trauma instead of the experience of always feeling victimized. I think the worst thing that happens with trauma is we keep repeating the pattern of feeling victimized. By experiencing sexual, physical assault, abandonment, neglect, or abuse in any form, or just emotionally being ignored and not taken care of, we interpret this as being unlovable. And then we take that identity of being unlovable out into the world and we keep repeating it. We keep drawing to ourselves and inviting relationships that will repeat the identity of being unlovable. What I'm saying to you is this is a way to break that chain and that link back to that negative belief. One of the ways to begin to heal the trauma is to identify that this circumstance and this event happened to me, not that I caused it. That yes, I am the victim and this was perpetrated against me, but I'm not at fault for it. There's nothing I could have done or said or responded to or reacted to differently that would have stopped this event from happening. Because in the course of my life, these events may occur to me. Maybe they've occurred more, maybe they've been more horrific than other people's, or maybe not. Maybe they're just one in many of the human conditions that we all share. By thinking of it as a shared experience, I'm also taking the power away from it, saying, you know, it's not just me, but universally, many of us will experience the pain of being traumatized in some way. So therefore, I'm having this experience with the world and with everyone. I'm not just having it with myself. What this is teaching you ways to separate yourself and your identity from the event. Instead of calling yourself, I am the trauma, and I am this horrible, horrific, terrible thing, is to say, I feel this trauma. I experienced this trauma. This trauma happened to me, but it's not me. It's not who I am. As you slowly make those shifts, you will notice that you feel more empowered and that the sting and the negative, long-lasting effect of the trauma may not feel so brutal and may not be as long-lasting. One of the reasons that trauma stays is because we keep speaking to ourselves in that negative, self-limiting language. I'm never going to be loved. I'm never going to find that relationship. No one's ever going to love me again. Or I'm not lovable, I'm unattractive, or I'm ugly, or I'm too this or too that. It's the language that we keep speaking to ourselves that really keeps the trauma alive. The trauma is only there, like any other experience in your life, to bring a lesson. It's your ability and your power that you have to define, what lesson do I want to understand from this? Do I want to believe that this is here to only show me that I'm not worthy? Or do I want to believe that this is here to show me I deserve way more than I've been allowing or inviting in my life? Whether that's in relationship, whether that's in material things, whether that's in spiritual experiences, or just in having joy in your life. The idea is I'm going to redefine the trauma so the trauma no longer has power over me. This is not to gloss over the trauma or ignore it. This is not to say just because I say that, now I'm magically cured. No, this is to say every time you feel it and it comes back to you, just like in post-traumatic stress disorder, where you keep reliving flashback after flashback, that trauma is by having this language, you can reinvent the wheel, so to speak. You can start to say, this event that happened in my past is not serving me in my present. What I know right now in this moment is I do deserve to be cared for. I do deserve to be treated respectfully and lovingly and kindly. And I don't deserve to keep reliving these events that tear down every fabric of my psyche and of my being. Trauma is there to help you grow. Think about those of you, I'm really into fitness, and those of you that are into health and wellness, your body doesn't get stronger by laying on the sofa. It gets stronger by working out and pushing it to its limits and stretching your muscles. And there's even pain that happens, and you have muscle pain to tell you that your muscles are breaking down before they're going to heal. Think of trauma as something that's breaking down before you're going to heal, not an event that's there to stop you and keep you paralyzed for the rest of your life. Many people walk around being traumatized and they never heal from it. I listened to something on the news recently where there was a woman who had come through the Holocaust and was a survivor, and she was kind of still replaying those events in her head and living in a world that was very terrifying for herself, even though she was now in a free society and had this wonderful and loving family. As she got older and older, those events became more and more vivid to her. One of the reasons that happens, and I want you to understand, is the further away you move from your trauma, the more distance you get from it, sometimes the more vivid you recall the trauma. It becomes much more real to you 10 or 20 years later. Reason being, when it's happening, you're just surviving. You don't have time to integrate it into you and focus on it and really feel the effects of it. As you get more distance from it, you start to analyze and experience your emotions, and it becomes way more vivid and way more real to you, and your recollection about the events can even become clearer. That is not a sign that you should stay there and that you should stay stuck and that you should only focus on it. That is a sign that your body, your mind, your soul, your spirit is trying to liberate you from the trauma. It's saying, I have carried you this far and I don't want to continue to carry you any further. There are so many ways that you can begin to digest that trauma and to release that trauma. And the first thing is just to own and understand and describe it and tell the story of it, to really put it out there on paper, to really share the story with another human being. It's a wonderful time to get involved in some therapies that can help have a witness to your trauma, because having a witness to your trauma really makes it real for you. A lot of times we walk around thinking I'm crazy, that I'm feeling all these feelings for something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. And truth is, you're not crazy. Truth is, it is that painful to experience trauma. It enters every cell of your body, and it really does change you on a cellular level. So as we're discussing and as we're exploring the trauma, we have to tell the story of it. There's no getting around it. And there's no saying to yourself, this happened so long ago, I should be over it. The minute you hear yourself saying, I should be over it, is the opportunity for you to start working on it. You're not over it. Your mind is replaying it and bringing it back to you so that you'll pay attention to it and so that you'll resolve it. And you can't resolve it without walking through the stages of grief. So I want to tell you a little bit about grieving. There is no healing from trauma without grieving what actually happened. You have to really become undone, and you have to really release emotionally that energy that's been stored in you, not only psychologically, but the physical energy that you carry when you carry grief around. You know, there's a reason people that get pains in their neck or stomach aches or back aches from years of carrying emotional trauma in their body, and they never acknowledge it. Think about when you're most scared and you notice that feeling in your gut where you get very tense and you feel butterflies, sometimes even nausea. There's a reason for that. Your emotion has a direct effect on your physiology. Think about when you're stressed and you're angry and you're frustrated and you can't come to a solution and you're arguing with somebody and you get a headache. There's a reason that you're trapped. There's an emotion trapped in your brain that's trying to express itself, and it can't express itself logically. Something that's really critical to understand about healing trauma, and actually healing through anything, is that your emotions don't make sense. They don't have to. They're not logical. They're an experience. And if you can acknowledge the intellectual parts of yourself, your understanding, the depth that you have, your ability to analyze and problem solve, then you should equally respect the depth of your emotion, feeling things very deeply in real time and with authenticity is part of the healing from the emotion, is saying, I'm here, I'm part of you, you can't erase me, I'm not going anywhere, and embracing that part of you and giving it as much expression as you give the intellectual parts of yourself. As you describe the trauma and as you talk about the trauma, the grieving will naturally come, but you have to allow it. I remember talking to a client, and she recently had a horrible breakup. It was the love of her life. She felt like part of her soul had been ripped out of her and that she wasn't going to be able to get through this. She found herself at home, and for the first time, instead of running and trying to cope with unhealthy things like drugs or food or another relationship, she decided to sit in it. It's an expression that therapists will use quite a bit, just sit in it. And she decided to sit with the grief and give herself permission to take a little break from her work, from her world, from other relationships, and just grieve. To lay in her room and listen to songs that allowed her to express her sadness and cry, to curl up on the sofa with a good blanket and a pet. And I'm telling you, there's so much healing in that. When we're at our worst, sometimes we think, well, it doesn't matter. I don't have time for this. I have to go to work. I have a commitment. My friends are expecting me. And we take our grief and we pack it up in a little box somewhere inside of us. And it's just sitting there waiting to explode. It might take 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years, where suddenly you're just wrecked with grief that you never dealt with. And it could be grief from your childhood, from your past. It could be from a horrible breakup. It could be from the recent pandemic and losing a loved one. It could be just from life circumstances changing and something that you thought mattered to you suddenly is gone. It could be a person, it could be a job, it could be part of your identity. We can't gloss over grief. Grief is so important in the healing process. I always say to people, God gave you tears, He meant for you to use them, right? Just like we go to the bathroom and you don't question when you need to go to the bathroom, you just go. So why do you question when you need to cry that you should hold your tears back? It's emotional constipation, at least in my world it is. So this is an invitation for you to start honoring your emotional life, because by doing so, you're going to start to get relief from the trauma, but you will never be free from it if you don't start acknowledging it, telling the story of it, and then giving yourself permission to literally sit in it and allow the grief to come. Of course, I always think it's wonderful to have a coach. a witness, a therapist, a friend that can sit with you through that process, because it does help for you to learn that it's okay, for you to feel validated, and for you also to learn how to self-soothe, to allow yourself in the middle of feeling broken and feeling exposed and feeling vulnerable, to let someone else sit with you in a loving manner, to just acknowledge you, is very, very, very powerful. You see, the trauma taught you that you should hide your pain, you should hide your shame, you should hide from people, you shouldn't trust people, you shouldn't show people your true face, you shouldn't totally be honest because you'll be taken advantage of or you'll be hurt. And by sitting in the room with another, even if it's just a therapist, and letting that trust build, you're going to learn that even in my worst, I deserve love. Even at my worst, I deserve compassion. Even at my worst, I continue to be a real, whole, authentic human being that is worthy. And that is the most important lesson I think that you're going to learn from letting go of your trauma.